Hi, in this tutorial we're going to make this St. Patrick's Day scrapbook page. We're going to use a custom brush which we're going to create for the shamrocks. We're going to bring in a graphic that we created in a previous tutorial. And we're going to use some layer styles and probably a blending mode. So let's get started. Let's talk about the brush tool. This is your brush tool right here, and you have all these options down here at the bottom. Just click on this little arrow and your brush sets will open up. These are all your different brush sets. Each set has a bunch of different brushes in it. To make a custom brush, let's come up under the shape tool. We'll get this custom shape right here in the corner. Click on this arrow and that will open up all our different shapes. Now this is the default shapes. You can have show all elements. I know that our shamrock is under the foliage and trees, so I'll just go to foliage and trees, and there's our shamrock right there. Just pick the shamrock. Let's come up here and draw a shamrock. Just click and drag. We want this to be black so that it's opaque. We don't want anything in the background to show through. So let's make the brush. Let's just come up under Edit, Define Brush. Let's just name this brush Shamrock. Click OK. Now when we come back to our brush, we come down here under this arrow in our default brushes. There's our Shamrock. It went into whatever set we had open at the time. Let's take a look at some of the brush settings. Let's start with a new layer. We'll just delete this layer. Just drag it to the trash can. Let's look at our brush settings. Fade determines how many steps it'll take for your brush to fade to nothing. Now we're at 0 right now. That means it will never fade. Or you can drag it up to 9,999, which realistically will never fade. That's so many steps. Let's just take a look at 20. Okay, and you can put in the numbers right here if you want, or you can use the slider. Let's just say 20. Let's just see how that fades out. When we click and drag, see how it fades out? It takes 20 steps and it fades out to 0. So that's what fade does. We'll just leave it at 0 because we don't want it to fade out. Hue jitter will change the hue anywhere between your foreground color and your background color. So if you pull this all the way to 100%, let's just start clicking up here and it'll go from black to white to different shades of gray. So that's what hue jitter does. It just goes between the background and the foreground color. Let's turn our jitter back to 0. Let's take a look at scatter. Scatter will just scatter it around, and you can look down here and see what it's going to do. As I drag this slider to the right, you can see down here what it's doing. It's starting to scatter those out. Now if we come up here and draw, see how it scattered them out? Looks like we still have a little bit of hue jitter going on. That seems to be a bug that I've found. Even though we have our hue jitter at 0, one way we can get rid of that is to come down here and pick a different brush and just draw something with the different brush up here. And now when we go back to our shamrock brush, now the hue jitter won't be there anymore. Let's turn on the scattering again. And yeah, they're all black. Okay, so that's scattering. We could undo all that, but that's a lot of undoing to do. Let's just throw that layer away. Let's just make another new layer. Let's come down here and take a look at spacing. Let's turn our scattering back to 0. You can see down here what spacing is going to do. That just spaces it out. Now as we draw with our brush, it just puts space in between each shamrock. And we can have more space or less space depending on where we move that slider. The next thing we can control is the roundness. You can see what that's doing right here. That'll just make that flat or round. And we can change the angle. So those are the brush settings. You can use any combination of these that you want, and you can set that as a default by clicking on this little box down here. I'm not going to save this as a default. I'm just going to change them as I use my brush. Let's just change that back to 0. A little bit about the brush tool. If you want to make your brush smaller, you can just hit the left bracket key that's right next to the P, and it'll go smaller. Or you can hit the right bracket key and it will go bigger. So those are the basics of the brush tool. Let's just throw that layer away and start with our scrapbook page. Let's start with our background. Let's grab the gradient tool. Let's click on our gradients down here, and the gradient editor will open. I want it to go from a dark green to a light green, so click on this little square down here. This is a color stop. And then click on the color swatch, and we'll pick a darker green. Something like that. Click OK. Now on this one, let's click on that color stop. Let's click on the color swatch. Let's make that a lighter green. Something about like that, and that shows our gradient right there. Click OK. Click OK. Now I want to use this gradient right here. This is a reflected gradient. What that's going to do, I'm going to start drawing from the middle and go down, and it will reflect it up at the top. Let's start right at 6. Since I have a 12-inch document, we'll go right in the middle, 6, and I'm just looking at these rulers over here on the left-hand side. Click right on 6, hold down the shift, that'll keep it straight. We'll just go straight down and let go of it right there, and there we go. Now we've got our dark green to light green to dark green. There's our background. Now we're going to use our custom brush. Double click on the foreground color to open the color picker. Let's pick a nice light green color. Maybe something like that. Okay, we're going to put a little border effect across the top and across the bottom using those shamrocks, using our shamrock brush. So let's get the brush tool. Make sure our shamrock is selected. Let's make it a little bit smaller than that. Hit the left bracket key. Okay, something like that. Let's change these brush settings. Let's give it some spacing because I don't want these to overlap at all because I'm going to be giving them a stroke. If they overlap at all, the stroke is going to go around the group of shamrocks rather than each individual shamrock. So I want to make sure that they don't overlap. So that looks probably good, and I want to scatter them just a little bit. Let's try that. Okay, and we got our green color. Let's make a new layer. So we'll put this on our new layer, and let's just drag across the top here. Okay, that looks pretty good. I like that. Let's go ahead and drag across the bottom. Nope, see, they overlap. I don't want that. Command Z or Control Z. Let's try that again. Okay, that one will work. Let's make another new layer and we'll just do it again because I want a few more in there than that. Let's go back the other direction. Let's start over here at the right side and go back. Let's turn the visibility of this layer off so we make sure they don't overlap. And then let's draw them across the bottom. Looks like we're fine. They don't overlap. Let's go ahead and turn the visibility of both layers back on. Let's make another new layer, and I'm going to change the brush settings just a little bit. I'm going to give this a hue jitter, and I'm going to go all the way over to 100. But I'm going to make the brush smaller. Click the left bracket key to make it smaller. About like that. I'm going to not space it quite as far apart. Maybe not scatter it quite as much. Let's turn the visibility of these layers off and let's see how it looks. Oh yeah, I like that. They are overlapping just a little bit, so Command Z or Control Z for that. Let's give it a little bit more spacing. Let's try that. Well, they still overlap a little bit. Okay, a little bit more spacing. There we go. Let's do some more down here. I'm going to make a new layer and go back across it again. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time. Make another layer and go across it. Okay, I like that. Let's turn the visibility of all the layers on. Let's put our stroke around them. So with one of them selected, let's come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. This is the layer that has some of the small shamrocks on it. Let's give it a stroke. Let's just give it about a 6. That looks okay. Click OK. Now we want to copy that to these other layers. Let's hold down the Option or the Alt if you're on a PC and click on that FX and just drag it to all these other layers. Just like that. Okay. Now what we can do is rearrange those layers if you want. I'm going to go ahead and put some of those smaller ones behind the bigger ones. You can just click and drag on those layers. When you see the line between the different layers turn thick and black, you can just drop the layer right there, and that's where the layer will go. I'm just going to move some of these other small shamrocks down below the bigger shamrocks. Something like that. That's fine. You can do whatever you want. You can put them wherever you want. That's fine. Right now we're getting quite a few layers. I'm going to put all those layers in a group and just call them the border. You can just select them all, hold down the shift and select them all, and this is the group icon. Click on that to create a group, and we'll just name that the border. Okay, let's bring in our graphic. Come down here to the photo bin. I already have it open. This is a St. Patrick's Day graphic that we created in another tutorial. I'll leave a link to that video below, and there'll be a link at the end of this video. Let's hit Command T or Control T to transform that, and we'll just drag on one of these corner handles. These squares are called handles. We'll just make that a little bit smaller, and then we'll just move it up here. We just want to move that on top of the shamrock, so let's just move that layer up above the border group. There we go. Now let's put in the year. Just get the type tool. We'll make that white and just click up here and start typing. Let's drag it down a little bit. Let's put a stroke around that. We can use the same stroke as we used on the shamrocks. Just click on this arrow to open that group, and we can just option click or alt click if you're on a PC on that FX and just drag it up onto that layer. Let's make it a little bit bigger though. Double click on that FX, we'll just increase the size. About like that. Click OK. Now let's bring in our picture. Let's drag it in from the photo bin. Let's move that layer up to the top. Let's move our picture down, and we'll make it a little bit smaller and rotate it just a little bit. Click the check mark. Now let's bring in a frame for that. Over here in the shapes, there are some frames, and we'll just grab this frame right here and drag it in. Let's make it a little bit bigger. It comes in on its own layer. You can see that up here, and it's on top of our picture, and that's fine. We just need to scale it and rotate it a little bit and make it fit our picture. We can do that by pulling on these handles. These squares are called handles. Click OK. Now I want that frame to be a dark green, so let's just double click on our foreground color, and that will open the color picker. As we move our cursor into our work, the cursor becomes an eyedropper. We can just pick a green. We'll pick this dark green right here, and that will become our new foreground color. Click OK. Now let's get our paint bucket and just click right on that frame. That paints that frame that color. I want to put some layer styles on that. I want to put a bevel and a drop shadow on there. So let's come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's turn this dial so that our shadow is coming from the upper left. That'll put the shadow down here at the lower right. Let's click on Drop Shadow. Let's give it a little bit of a distance. This is the distance from our frame. Size will determine how hard or soft the shadow is. Let's make it a little bit softer. Something like that. And let's increase the opacity. I want it to be a little bit darker than it is. Let's increase the opacity just a little bit. Okay, something like that. Let's give it a bevel. This will give it a embossed or a little bit of a 3D effect. Let's just move this slider over to the right. Yeah, something like that. Let's click OK. Now you've got lots of room over here for journaling. Let's actually make a spot for journaling. Let's get the type tool. Let's change this to black. Let's change the size. We don't need it 86 point. Let's change the leading, something like that. I'm just going to put some lines in. You can type whatever you want, or you can put the lines in if you want, and after you get your scrapbook page printed, you can write whatever you want on those lines. And I'm just copying and pasting these lines. Okay, click the check mark. This is a little bit dark in the background here to be able to write and be able to see that type very well. So let's go ahead and lighten that up. We're going to use our brush, our shamrock brush again. Let's get the brush. Let's make sure our shamrock is selected. It is. Let's change our color. Just click on that foreground color and it will open the color picker. When we move our cursor into the work, it'll change into an eyedropper, and we can just pick this color right here, and let's just lighten that up a little bit more. Something like that. Click OK. Now let's make our brush a little bit bigger. Hit the right bracket key. That will make our brush a little bit bigger. That's the maximum size our brush will go. So click right there. Now I want to still make that a little bit bigger, so hit Command T or Control T if you're on a PC. You can just pull on one of these handles in the corner to make that bigger. Something like that. Click the check mark. Let's move that down just above the background. Let's close up this group first. Just click and drag on that layer. When you see the line get dark and thick, drop right there, and now it's right above our background layer. Let's lighten that up just a little bit by using a blend mode. Let's come up here under the blend modes and choose screen. Okay, now let's put a couple little shamrocks in there. We've still got our brush selected. Let's take the size down by hitting that left bracket key to about there. Let's get a dark color. Click on the foreground color and let's choose this dark color in here. Click OK. Let's get a new layer. Let's go right to the top. Click. Now let's put an outline around that. Come up under Layer, Layer Style, Style Settings. Let's put a stroke on that. About right there, and click OK. Let's just copy this layer twice. We'll make a cluster of these shamrocks. Command J or Control J will make a copy, and we'll just make 2 copies. Select the Move tool and click right on this top one, and we'll drag it right down here. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And let's rotate it just a little bit. Do that by coming up here to the corner. Your cursor turns into a curved double-headed arrow. Just click and drag. That'll rotate that around. Click the check mark. Let's get this other one. Let's drag it over here to the side just a little bit. And let's make it much smaller. Click and drag on one of these corner handles. Something like that. Let's put that one right on the top. Click the check mark. Grab that layer and move that up to the top. Okay, now we have our cluster of shamrocks. Let's put those all in a group. The top one's already selected. Hold down the Shift and select the bottom layer. And let's put those in a group. Command G or Control G, or you could just hit this icon up here, and that's the group. We'll call that shamrocks. Now let's copy that group. Command J or Control J will make a copy of that group. Let's just slide that down here to the bottom. Let's just flip that horizontally. So come up here to Image, Rotate. Make sure you have Flip Layer Horizontal. Don't have Flip Horizontal up here because that will flip your whole artwork and your whole scrapbook page. Just come down here to Flip Layer Horizontal. Click on that. Let's rotate that just a little bit and move it around into position where we like it, and click the check mark. And we're done. We went through a lot of things in this tutorial. Most of it was about the brushes. You can do a lot of things with those brushes. So practice and learn and try some things out. Experiment a little bit. See what you can do with those brushes. We also used the layer styles and we used the blending mode. If you enjoyed this tutorial or if you learned anything new, don't forget to subscribe and share this with your friends. I try and make at least 1 tutorial a week. Thank you for joining me in this one, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thanks. Bye.